Do you enjoy rules? I love rules, but I used to think that I didn't, and then I realized how important they are. Why? Because they provide a standard. I remember a time when both of my husband and I had to take a PT test, a physical fitness test for firefighting. And my husband had previously been in the Army, and he would tell me about the PT test that they would take and how angry he would get because of the lack of standard. Think like he's doing a fully extended push-up and some people are doing this and getting the same amount of points. And he would come up home fired up, and honestly, I would laugh, I would roll my eyes, say whatever. And then I had to take a PT test. And it all went well until the pull-ups. They asked for volunteers and I went first. I was like, sure, I can do some pull-ups. And they told us we are not allowed to kip or swing. So you can't swing, you have to do them strict. And I was able to do 3. And I was so proud of that. And I got to the end of my 3rd one and I'm hanging there and I looked at the judge and I was like, hey, no kipping, right? No swinging. And he confirmed there's no swinging. So I tried to get one more and I couldn't, so I dropped it. And honestly, I was quite pleased with myself. 3's pretty good for me. Until I watched the next person go. And they did a handful, and then I watched them swing up on the bar and continue to swing. And I waited for their reps to get disqualified. But it counted. And then it counted again, and then it counted again. And the judge kept counting these reps that he told me were not eligible. And I was livid. And I sat there thinking, like, I could have done that. I could have swung up. I could have, added a handful of points to my score. And now my husband was laughing at me because of all those times I had rolled my eyes at him and his complaints against the PT test. And that's when I learned I actually really love rules because I love standards and I want to know how to surpass them, but there has to be a standard. So if you're like me and you have a love for justice or standards or rules, then the verses in today's Devo might make you angry. Because the truth is that grace is wildly unfair. And you and I get to benefit from that. Grace is getting something that we don't deserve. The passage that we're going to read from today is in Romans chapter 3. A little tidbit on this one is Martin Luther called Romans 3, this section we're going to read, he called it the chief point of the Bible. And then Leon Martin, who was a scholar and a theologian, also called it possibly the most important single paragraph ever written. So buckle in, it's going to be good. Okay, Romans chapter 3, verse 21. By the way, this is Paul. He's writing to a church in Rome. And he says, for everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard. Yet God, in his grace, freely makes us right in his sight. He did this through Jesus Christ when he freed us from the penalty of our sins. Here's what this is saying. We've all sinned. I don't think I have to convince you that you sinned and I sinned, and yet sin is sin. We all fall short of God's standard, which is perfection, and yet we're made right, which means we can approach the throne of God through Jesus who died for our sins. And here's the unfairness. By the way, if you've heard this before, can you pretend like you haven't? Don't let it be brushed off. This is a really big deal. Ask God to reveal this truth to you in a new way, because you and I deserve death because of our sin. We couldn't reach that standard of perfection. And yet Jesus came and lived a perfect life so that you and I could put our trust in him. He died on the cross and rose again, because at the end of our lives, we will have to give an account on how we spent our time. Some of us, if you're like me, you're going to want to justify it on your own goodness or badness. Here's what happened to me. Here's why this happened. Here's what I've done to try to get to that perfection on our own merit, and that's not going to work. Because the only acceptable answer when we get into the presence of God is, I'm with him. When we point to Jesus, the perfect one who laid down his life as a sacrifice, took my sin upon him, died and rose again. And so, friends, grace is wildly unfair. And thank God that it is. My prayer for you today is that you understand the unfairness of grace and that we live in the truth of that.